Welcome to the Real World. My name is Cameron. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Real World podcast. If you're a movie fan, you're in the right place. We talk all about movies, new ones, old ones, stuff in theaters, stuff in streaming, Blu-ray, DVD, physical media. We're all about that. All the 4K stuff we're getting into now. So this is the place. If you're a movie fanatic like I am, this is where you're going to get all the reviews and reactions you could ask for. Today on the podcast, we're talking about the Middle-earth saga, the Lord of the Rings films, The Hobbit. The latest film, The War of the Rohirrim, is now in theaters, and I got a chance to check that out, so I'll be discussing that one as well. Very excited to talk about all of these movies. There's so many people that are such big fans of these films. They've got a lasting legacy. It's gone on over 20 years, coming up on about 25 years now. So really interested to talk about these movies. And joining me on this episode is Bert. How you doing, man?
Hey Cam, I'm doing great. How's it going?
Doing well. Well, let's jump right in. All right, folks. So this is it. The big Middle Earth podcast is here. Bert is on with me. We're gonna have a fun discussion about these movies. Make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos here on the Real World podcast. Let's go ahead and jump in though. Bert, let's just talk a little bit about kind of the franchise overall before we get into the details of each film. What's kind of been your experience with this interesting fantasy film saga?
Definitely an experience to remember. I mean, some films you have like an interesting theater experience or something very
Mm,
memorable to talk about it, and most of the films though they're all kind of blend together, right?
sure.
This one was very notable because so the trailer comes out before any of the movies had come out, and it's a trilogy trailer. I don't Have you seen the trilogy trailer, the original
Oh,
one?
I don't know if I have. No.
So I see in the theater. I'm about to watch a movie, and this trilogy trailer comes on for Lord of the Rings. I don't even know if I knew what it was, and it shows a few just brief glimpses of scenes, and then it says in 2001 Fellowship of the Ring, and then 2002 Christmas you'll get Two Towers and so on, and I'm
Right.
thinking what, and it looked it was very early stage, I think, and they show so little that I thought, wow, that I don't know about that. Like I just didn't
Right.
get a good vibe from it.
Sure.
So then Christmas 2001 rolls around, and I was traveling, and I wanted to go out and see a film, and I was by myself actually, and I wanted to see a good long film, get my money's worth. And
Yeah.
so I thought, I'd probably seen another trailer for Fellowship of the Ring at that point.
Uh-huh.
And so I thought, yeah, I'll take a chance on this. I really thought I was going to dislike it,
Oh,
honestly.
really?
And so I had like rock bottom expectations, went in this thing, and I just didn't expect, I'd never seen a film like that,
Right.
not just an epic quality of it, but um, just such an expansive story, because
Yeah.
obviously being part one, and I just love everything about it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my theater experience. I was just pretty much blown away by it.
Sure. Yeah, mine's a little different. I'm a little bit younger than you, and so this is another one kind of similar to Born. I think I talked about this in our Born podcast, or when we talked about Born. My parents went and saw it and left me at the
Hmm.
grandparents' house. And when they came back, they were just ecstatic, and I could
Yeah,
tell they really enjoyed it. And I
yeah,
remember them telling me, "You're really gonna like this. I can't wait to show you this movie." And
yeah.
so that was one of those that I had to wait for the DVD to come out to watch it. And
Mhm.
yeah, similarly, just kind of blown away by it. It was so different from anything I had seen before. And so yeah, that was kind of my introduction to it.
Yeah. On top of that, the great thing too was coming out of that movie. I thought, wow. So next Christmas is, I was like elated. I'm like, next Christmas there's gonna be another one, and the Christmas after that there's another one. So like every Christmas, 3 years in a row.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was just terrific to walk in the theater and see a film like this. I feel like you can't really count on that most of the time.
that's true.
Or a
That's
sequel will
true.
come along and it's but to see one really great film and know that there's two more coming, it was just a very exciting time.
Yes, and you got to think about the incredible risk that the studio took and the
Yeah,
producers on Peter
yeah,
Jackson to make three back to back to back
yeah.
and release them that way. That was pretty risky, and it certainly paid off. So,
And Peter Jackson was not I mean, he had made The Frighteners, and I
Right.
don't know, not much else, and
No.
so it was quite a risk taken on him as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I read that he was a big fan, I think when he was a teenager, of the books that Tolkien wrote,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
he kind of pursued it, So yeah, he's done a quite a job with these movies, being kind of the grand architect of it all over these past, over 20 years now. Still involved very, very deeply with the franchise. So yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about Tolkien because he's kind of the guy that conceived this whole world. There's
Yeah.
a great movie about him called Tolkien, and it came out just a
Oh.
few years ago. It stars Nicholas Hoult, and it's a
Oh.
very good movie,
Hmm.
focused on his younger days in World War One, his experiences
Oh.
there. That kind
Yeah.
of is where he kind of came up with this whole idea of the fellowship and the whole story. And his Christian faith obviously played a huge role in kind of the themes and the ideas and the message of the stories as well. He of
Hmm.
course wrote The Hobbit first, and then went on and wrote Lord of the Rings all as one book. That was kind of this giant book that the publishers were like, let's split these up maybe into three different books. And now we have the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and the rest is history. So pretty neat. Like I said, the new film War of the Rohirrim is already now in theaters. Um, so the franchise really shows no signs of slowing down, which is really
Yeah.
encouraging. And so, are you ready to jump into the first movie?
Can I ask you a couple questions
Yeah, go
first?
go right ahead.
So, this our discussion could go probably in a couple different directions. How
Yeah.
much do you sort of nerd out about Lord of the Rings? Like a lot, little bit?
I would say I'm not the mega fan. I
Yeah,
I have
yeah,
not read the book. I've started to read Fellowship. I still have not gotten through it. It's pretty dense.
yeah.
So I've
Density.
I've read The Hobbit though. The Hobbit is great. That's a great book. I read
Yeah,
that when I
yeah,
was in school and really enjoyed it. And yeah, Lord of the Rings, it's a lot of detail there. It's a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
lore, it's a lot of mythology, a lot of world building that I
Right.
find to be fascinating. It's just a
Yeah.
time dedication that I don't quite have at this moment.
Right.
So I'd love
Right.
to finish reading the books. I've never done that. But I'm a big fan of the movies. I mean, the movies I think are
Yeah.
fantastic. It's such an interesting world, great characters I really like. I would say my wife is a little bit more into Lord of the Rings than I am. I'm more of a Star Wars guy, right?
Yeah.
Star
Yeah.
Wars is kind of my thing that I like nerd out about and know like names of planets and alien species and all that
Yeah.
crazy
Right.
stuff.
Right.
So I'm not quite on that level with Lord of the Rings, but I greatly enjoy them
Yeah.
as a film series for sure. How about
Right.
you?
Yeah, I mean, I same. I think we're
Yeah,
basically exactly the same because I
yeah,
I love the films, but I mean,
right.
we're not going to be like speaking Elvish and like getting into like really. Yeah, there's not going
Right.
to be that kind of fandom going on here. It's really just
Yes.
that we love the films. So
Yep.
I was just curious too. And then I want to ask you on disc, do you
Mm.
prefer extended edition or theatrical?
Theatrical. I'm theatrical all the way. And that's something we'll probably dive into as we discuss each of these because I've seen the extended cuts
Hmm.
of all of them. And I definitely lean towards the theatrical versions, even though I'm not averse to long movies. I mean, Zack Snyder's Justice League, right? I've seen that like 20 times and it's a 4 hour movie. So it's not necessarily that I hate that they're just so long. I just feel like the theatrical cuts are so perfect,
Hmm.
perfectly paced. They give you just enough information to tell the story. And the extended cuts have some great scenes in them,
Yeah,
but I still feel like the theatrical version, when I'm going to watch them, those are the ones I'm going for. I'm not going for the extended cuts. So those
gotcha.
are my thoughts on it. How about you? Are you a little different? Do you prefer the longer versions?
I'm all about the extended
Okay.
editions. Now,
Okay.
there are some scenes where it's maybe gets a little bit tedious, at
Sure.
times.
Sure.
But once I sort of get in that universe, I just really
Mm,
enjoy being there. And so,
sure.
in fact, I saw, the first three films in the theater, but I couldn't even tell you now which scenes are extended versus not,
Oh, okay.
because
Interesting.
I've only ever watched since then. I've only watched the extended,
Huh. Okay.
and so I don't know. I can't really find whole scenes that I would want to necessarily do away with anymore. So I'm more
Right.
about the extended.
Okay, interesting. That'll be cool. That'll be an interesting perspective to have then going in. So, all right, you
Yeah,
ready to talk fellowship then?
yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, here we go. All right, we're jumping in right now, diving into the very first film released 2001. It is The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This is the one that started it all. So this is the one that kind of sets up the world, sets up all the characters. Uh, wow, they do a brilliant job just in that opening sequence of
Yeah,
the narration by Kate Blanchett as Galadriel. She's kind of explaining the history of this world and the ring and what that is and who Sauron is and the elves and the men and all the different groups that we have here of different places and peoples. So it's just a great kind of way in. It kind of starts off pretty exciting. It's that. First of all, I guess before really even the scene starts, it's that opening title with the Howard Shore music, which is so kind of like
yeah, yeah,
haunting and mysterious and so good. Such a great theme. And
yeah.
then that whole sequence with the battle with Sauron and
Hmm.
Isildur and the whole thing, it's just really well done. Looks great. And then we're off in the Shire, and we're introduced to that whole side of the world and Gandalf comes into it, and it's just a great kind of starts pretty big and epic, and then gets very kind of intimate. I like that kind of juxtaposition of this big battle scene and this craziness going on, and then we go to this kind of quiet hillside Shire
Yeah.
that I think is a great way to kind of draw you into the story, kind of set you up and kind of like grab your attention with that crazy battle scene, and then kind of like slowly ease you into it. So it's great. The film looks fantastic. It's all shot in New Zealand, of course. Peter Jackson, being from New Zealand, wanted to shoot it there. And I'm glad he did because the vistas are just beautiful. The landscapes are amazing to look at. Some of it just looks fake, it's like, did they just create that in a computer? But no, it's all really there.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that stands out about this franchise is the fact that it was all shot on location. That really makes a big difference with movies like this, giving it that grounded sense of realism, even though it's this fantasy world, having that kind of
Yeah.
grounded sense of this is a real place we're in filming this movie adds a lot to drawing you in and making it believable. So, huge fan of this movie. Super fun way to introduce each character. It's not like they're all dropped on you at once. They kind of each
Right.
come into the story slowly as they're kind of needed. You got
Hmm.
Frodo and Sam and Bilbo and Gandalf there in the Shire, and then Strider comes into it, right? We learn his name's Aragorn, and Viggo Mortensen does a great job playing him very, very mysteriously. You're not even really sure if he's a good guy or not,
Right.
which I
Right.
really like.
Yeah.
Even on the poster, I remember looking at this poster, which the Blu-ray cover art I have is the theatrical poster, and I remember looking at this when my parents got the DVD and going, "Oh, is this guy the bad guy?" Because he kind of looks kind of mean, He's got like his sword and his
Yeah.
hair, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, is he the?" They're like, "No, no, no, you'll see when you watch it." But it's great. It's great way to introduce all those characters
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
um, the ring wraiths. I remember being freaked out by those guys. I still kind of am a little bit. They're really great
Sure.
designs, character designs there.
Yeah.
And then all the other we get to go to Rivendell, and it's a big movie. This movie's 3 hours, or right under 3 hours, 2 hours 58 minutes. The extended cut is 3 hours 28 minutes, so it's adding at least a little over half an hour to the film, or a full hour, I guess, to the film almost. But yeah, they just do a great job with it. The production design, the costumes, hair and makeup, the stunt work,
Yeah.
the effects. I mean, they're utilizing all kinds of different effects. It's not um, just green screens and all that. It's miniatures and it's all kinds of different things that they're employing here. The makeup on the orcs looks phenomenal. I mean, it really is amazing what they were able to do there. Um, so yeah, I'm a big fan of this. It's kind of like the perfect way to introduce a fantasy world. Um, it's scary, it's got great action, it's funny. Merry and Pippin, those characters are so great to watch them do their thing. And then it can get very intense and dramatic, and so it's tons of fun. I really enjoy this movie. Bert, what do you think of The Fellowship of the Ring?
Yeah. I mean, outstanding. You hit a lot of the good points. Both trilogies kind of have this sort of single sympathetic character, and then all kinds of powerful characters around them. So the character
Yeah.
I'm talking about, of course, in the first trilogy is Frodo, and
Yeah.
he's so relatable, or as far as
Right.
he's very innocent and childlike, and
Yeah.
so the whole trilogy, you feel like you don't want this, almost like child to be hurt,
Right.
and
Right.
so and one of the challenges I think that Peter Jackson had was trying to make it pretty believable that, frankly, almost none of the main characters die throughout the entire trilogy.
Right. Right.
And although some of the premises of that lead to a lot of emotion are when you think one of the characters has died, right? Like at the end of
Right.
this
Sure.
first
Yes.
film.
Yes.
But Peter Jackson pulls that off really well.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say too, the Lord of the Rings trilogy is it's very kind of dreamy throughout,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and mostly serious. Like
Hmm.
just I didn't know where to insert this, but I just wanted to compare it to like the Hobbit
Mm-hmm.
trilogy. The Hobbit trilogy is a lot lighter of a tone, right? In
Sure.
general.
Yep.
And then back to Fellowship of the Ring. The reason why this film works so well for me, even comparing it to the other films, is just that you got all that variety that you were talking about. You start at the Shire, and then you move on to things like Ring Race and dragons and or Balrog and this kind of
Right.
stuff.
Right. Yeah.
I like how much we're given, the variety that we're given in it, and you mentioned like the cinematography and the
Mm.
sets and there's miniatures, crazy good stuff that and I love forced perspective, and this film
Yeah. Yeah.
probably does it better than any film ever made, I
Yep.
think. And there's so much of it throughout the whole trilogy that you
Yeah.
kind of take it for granted.
Right.
And I when I'm watching it, I try to force myself to take a step back and think, how did they do that shot?
Right.
Or they had to do it this way, but I didn't even think about it unless I forced myself to stop and think about the fact that the elves aren't normally that much taller than you know what I'm saying.
Right.
But all
Right.
all those
Yep.
great forced perspective things, all the tricks that they use, the hair, makeup, and costumes, the shot setups.
Mm.
Peter Jackson, on top of everything else, he probably could have phoned in a lot of the shot setups, but you got great ones like I think once or twice throughout the series where a character has fallen and the ring goes up in the air and their arm goes up and from the ring's point of view you see it going down on the person's finger. Stuff
Right.
like that is just
Yeah.
great.
It is.
So the care put into that on top of everything else that goes into these films, the absolute epic nature of these films,
Yeah.
the the music, one of the best scores I think I've ever
Mm.
heard.
Hmm. Yep.
I wanted to mention too the Shire theme. There's been some talk online about this. The first like 5 to 8 notes
Mm.
are the same first like 5 to 8 notes of the hymn. This is my father's world.
Oh, wow. I didn't
Check,
even ever put that together. That's
yeah,
you're,
if
you're
you
totally right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, or
Yeah.
check it out on YouTube. So,
Uh-huh.
but that doesn't knock it. It's just that
No.
I hear that every time I hear those first few notes. But regardless, the entire score is just wonderful and memorable.
Yes.
So a tremendous film. I can't think of really a single knock on the entire film, honestly.
Yeah. I know. I agree. It's one of the best of all time. I mean, it really is up there
Yeah,
with
yeah,
some of the best, not just fantasy films, but just films in general. It's so well made.
yeah.
So excellent. All right. Well, let's move right along then to The Two Towers, released in 2002. I don't know if that was planned or not, but it's kind of worked out really well. This one's runtime is 2 hours and 59 minutes. Extended cut 3 hours 43 minutes. So again, they're adding close to an hour of footage to that extended edition. This one, the middle chapter tends to be difficult, but I think again, since Tolkien wrote this as one story, it really works because you're building off of what happened in that first one. It really takes the approach of a lot of great sequels, such as The Empire Strikes Back, where you kind of go a little bit darker, you can go a little bit deeper into the characters. The characters also are splintered off. In the first film, they're kind of all together. That
Yeah.
fellowship is together throughout really the entire story until the very end when they kind of all go their separate ways. And so this one starts off that way. You kind of have three different big storylines going on with the
Hmm.
characters, and you're kind of cutting back and forth between each of those, which can be difficult. It's easy for films to kind of just focus on one too much, and then you don't really know what's going on with the other ones, and they come back later, and you're like, oh, I totally forgot that was going on. But this one really balances them quite well, to where you never really forget where the characters are and what they're doing. So it does that really well. It's a very well edited film. I'm a big fan of Aragorn. He's probably my favorite character, and here we get to explore his relationship with Arwen a lot deeper. Him and Liv Tyler, I think, do a great job in this movie. She was kind of like born to play an elf. I feel like she just kind of has that kind of glow about her, you know. And Hugo Weaving is
Gentle
great as
nature.
well. Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, all the actors that they cast, like Kate Blanchett, I mentioned, they just fit the roles so perfectly.
Hmm.
It's the casting is so good here. Um, I forgot to mention on Fellowship, Aragorn was actually recast
Yeah.
for 4 days. They shot with an actor named Stuart Townsend in that role, and it just was not working. And they ended up recasting, and of course, Viggo Mortensen did a brilliant job bringing that character to life. It's a very subdued kind of performance. It's very
Hmm.
intriguing and engaging. He's a great actor, so I really like what
Yeah.
he did with that role. Here we're introduced to new places, new characters. I love the Ents, which are these giant tree guys. The leader of the tree people, the Ents, is called Treebeard, and he's voiced by John Rhys Davies, who plays Gimli, which is pretty cool. He got to play two
Yeah.
roles there. He does a great job with that character. And then you have the whole sequence in Rohan. This is a new area that we hadn't seen in the first film. Theoden. You have Éowyn and you have Éomer, played by Carl Urban, who's another actor I like a lot. Miranda
Yeah.
Otto plays Éowyn. She does great. And then Bernard Hill, who I think just passed away pretty recently, played Theoden, King Theoden. And all of them do a great job, again, introducing us to this new kind of place and what role they would play, moving forward is obviously very important. And then you have the Gollum, Sam, and Frodo storyline, which is really interesting and suspenseful because you kind of never know what Gollum's going to do next, right? It's kind of like constantly having to watch your back, Sam and Frodo doing that. And it's really, really great. I just really think they do a great job with that dynamic. Of course, Andy Serkis, phenomenal performance when you see the behind the scenes and what he was doing. They're on location with the actors in this
Yeah.
like blue or green suit that he's wearing. It's pretty amazing to see. And then this all ends up with the Battle of Helm's Deep, which is this huge epic siege of this fortress uh, that, for my money, it's probably the best movie battle ever. I mean, it's really incredible what they're able to achieve there with the armies of orcs coming in and
Yeah.
the elves on the wall shooting the arrows and then the ladders
Hmm.
they're trying to climb up. I mean, it's just there's so many different facets to it and things going on. And it's all so easy to follow. That's another one of those things with these big battles like this. It's easy to get lost and be like, oh, who's where now and what's going on. The geography of everything's very clearly laid out
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
totally can follow it. So great stuff from the sequel that I feel like is that perfect kind of middle chapter of like building on the first one. We're not concluding the story. We're kind of ending on this really interesting cliffhanger, but just everything that happens in it is still it still feels like a complete story in and of itself in the same time. So yeah, I think they achieved greatness again in this second film. What do you think about the Two Towers?
Yeah. Tremendous again. I like how it opens with that exciting sequence with Gandalf and the Balrog because
Yeah,
it was kind of a cliffhanger. I mean, I don't
sure.
know if I knew that he survived it, but I do
Right.
know that Gandalf and the Balrog fall for what seems like 20 miles down. That's
Yes.
a really long drop.
Right.
Uh, and the Ents are terrific, and all the stuff with
Yeah.
Merry and Pippin interacting
Hmm.
with them and trying to convince them of things, and
Right.
the Ents' thought process
Yeah.
is great. King Theoden becoming sort of unspelled.
Oh
I like all
yeah.
that good stuff
Right.
with Wormtongue.
Mm-hmm.
Gollum, CGI for 2002 was off the chain. I mean, it's
Yes.
if I'm being critical, which I always am, there are moments with close-ups where it doesn't quite isn't quite sold, but that
Right.
quickly changes, and then there's another shot. So,
Right.
but I can't knock the film. I mean, for what they attempted, that was really ambitious. I mean, they weren't doing like fully. I was like the first fully fleshed out CGI character, right?
Yeah,
Other
this
than
is
maybe Jar Jar Binks or someone like
right.
that.
Yeah, it's right after Jar Jar, before, Polar Express and all that was a couple
Hmm.
years after this. So yeah, this is really early days with this whole performance capture technology. So yeah, very, very impressive.
Yeah, it feels honestly light years ahead of the animation in Polar Express, to be honest, as far
Right.
as
Yeah.
like flesh and
Yes.
eyes and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Which this is going for photorealism, whereas Polar Express is
Yeah,
that little bit more animated kind of
yeah,
style,
sure,
but
sure.
yeah, it's definitely very, very amazing what they did.
Yeah, and Circus, I I guess Peter Jackson said just have a go at whatever you want to do with the character, and I'm thinking Circus probably created this on his own,
Yeah.
and it's so odd, but it works
Mhm.
so well.
Right.
He's something like a hobbit, is how they describe him.
Yes.
Gollum is so there's still that hint of not human because hobbits
Yeah.
aren't human, but you
Right.
know what I mean.
Right.
Something that could be,
Humanity. Yeah. Uh-huh.
yeah,
Sure.
exactly. But yet this creature that the ring has turned him into,
Hmm.
it's works so great. I love the kill competition between Legolas and Gimli. That's some
Yes.
great stuff.
Yeah. Those
There's a
personal
really
touches are great. I love that.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's at that um Battle of Helm's Deep, there's that great hero moment where the Ents finally decide they're going to join in, and then there's this sort of wide shot of all of them coming together and heading toward the battle. Great,
Yes.
great hero shot there. Love that one.
Yes.
And as you said, the battle is terrific. I think
Yeah.
it's about as good as the one in Return of the King. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Sure.
But the only other thing I'll mention about this is I had to ask you. Okay, you mentioned Liv Tyler. She's all right. I can't help but feel that she's almost a bit mismatched with
Mm,
Aragorn because think about it, Miranda Otto. Okay,
right.
she's right there and
Right.
wants Aragorn, right?
Sure. Sure.
And the thing is, if he picked Miranda Otto's character, then he wouldn't have a father-in-law that's going to begrudge him for taking his daughter away from him, and
Sure.
this aggressive father-in-law all the time. So I'm not sure he made the right choice, but
Yeah.
the story is already written. So
I hear you. I think that was actually something I was thinking about when I was rewatching Two Towers. I was like, yeah, he's obviously got these kind of two choices he can make, but there's clear history with Arwen that we don't know about. And I
yeah.
don't know if they didn't show us intentionally or what the reason was. I don't know if there's writings about that, if Tolkien ever fleshed that out in his writings or
Hmm.
not. But there's clearly something that happened between them. That's why they have this connection. And I don't,
Yeah, yeah,
again, it's not really specifically drawn out in the
yeah,
film.
yeah,
So I get why people are kind of more like, why didn't he just go with Eowyn? But again, I don't know. I think it works, but because I guess maybe I've in my head I've kind of come up with something of they she saved him or something like that happened in the past between those two characters, and that's why they're so like he almost feels like indebted to her in a way, maybe.
well, yeah, and they keep hitting
Um,
you over the head with she's like, oh, I'm giving up so much. Well, that's your
yeah,
choice. Like, I'm
right.
not, you don't have to,
Right,
you know.
exactly. Right, right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I'd like to dive deep into Tolkien's writings and see if there's anything else about that because it is kind of a
Yeah,
fascinating relationship.
right.
All right, we ready to move on to Return of the King?
Yeah.
All right. All right, Return of the King released 2003, and this movie is 3 hours and 21 minutes. Extended cut, 4 hours, 11 minutes. Pretty epic. It doesn't get any more epic than that. This one has that great opening. You were just talking about Gollum. Has that great opening with Smeagol,
Yeah,
before he became
yeah.
Gollum and his whole backstory. Fantastic, fantastic sequence. I mean, that is honestly, it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole trilogy,
Hmm.
because it kind of just tells you this little story, like in and of itself, kind of like the opening of Fellowship is like, here's this little story about the past.
Yeah,
Um, and Andy Serkis without the the CGI makeover, getting
yeah,
to see him
yeah.
that way is pretty cool. And
Yes.
you kind of see that Smeagol, they kind of a lot of people say he's like the light side and the dark side, but he's kind of always been a bad guy. I mean, he essentially kills his best friend in that opening scene
Right.
for the ring. And so but it's a great sequence. The makeup and you see his whole transformation over that, little
Hmm.
montage there. It's fantastic. So
Yeah. Yeah.
great way to open the movie. And then of course, we get into the craziness with Shelob's lair.
Yeah.
Uh, Probably the
Mm.
scariest sequence for me of the whole thing. Absolutely terrifying. All that's great. And then, of course, you have Aragorn kind of coming into his own, finally becoming the king of Gondor. Of course, more great stuff with Legolas and Gimli having fun on the battlefield and that big, huge epic battle at the end of this. And I really like this one for me. Merry and Pippin are really kind of the characters that really kind of come to the forefront here and have really great, satisfying arcs that they kind of each become warriors essentially. I mean, really, which is really, really cool to see. And there's so many great scenes. Of course, again, Gollum is a character that really stands out here again for me throughout this film, and what he and Sam are going through, and
Yeah.
Frodo. That
Yeah.
whole dynamic is just so interesting, and the way it's kind of comes to a head right there in Mount Doom is really, really intense and incredible. So
Yeah.
it's one of those that kind of has a big task of wrapping this whole thing up in a satisfying way, and it really pulls it off. It really does. Everything about this is emotional and satisfying, and feels like it can't get any bigger than this, right? I mean, that you have literally like those Oliphants, you have the Nazgul with their dragons, and then you have the Ghost Army, and I mean, it's just this huge, insane battle scene. It's almost I kind of I still think I prefer Helm's Deep maybe because it's feels a little more intimate, whereas this one is so big. It's like, wait, what's going on here now? Okay, I
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
get a little bit lost in it, and it goes on for a long time, but it's still very well done. I mean, as big as it is, it's very well done, and I really like the ending of this film. There's, in my opinion, there's kind of my ending. This movie gets complained a lot from having too many endings. It's like
Yeah.
it ends
Sure.
and then it
Sure.
kind of
Yeah.
has another scene and then another scene, and there's like four endings, but
Yeah.
um, they're each well done scenes. They're really good, but for me, the ending is when the hobbits are there at Minas Tirith after the battle's over, and Aragorn comes to them, and they bow, and he says, "You bow to no one," and everyone bows to the hobbits. That's to me
Hmm.
kind of like this is kind of what we've been waiting for. This is the big
Yeah.
ending
Yeah.
of all these characters together, and kind of the weakest among us are the ones that are the heroes.
Right.
So I in my head that's kind of where the credits start to roll, but the scenes in Hobbiton are great. Kind of it comes full circle in a way, in a cool way,
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
like that. So that's my minor kind of nitpick, I guess you could say, about Return of the King. But I'm a big fan of this movie. For a long time, it was my favorite. Now I maybe lean a little bit towards Two Towers. We'll have to see where things shake out in our rankings at the end of this. But big fan of this one. Bert, what do you think of Return of the King?
Yeah, I love that opening scene with Smeagol and his transformation into Gollum.
Yep.
I'm so glad that Andy Serkis got to realize that
Yes.
character because I could be wrong. I don't think they were originally planning on doing that when they made the
Hmm.
movies.
Maybe not.
I think I gathered that a long time ago from watching behind the scenes. I could be wrong about that, but I
Hmm.
think that they made that decision because they thought, why not? He used to be
Yeah.
something like a hobbit, and so it
Right.
was really great to see that. That was unexpected.
Yeah.
And then great Minas Tirith battle, however you say that.
Yes. Yes.
I the battle is so thunderous. Like if you watch it with
Right.
surround sound or really good bass or even bassy headphones, it's just so thunderous. I guess uh yeah, it's a little bit bigger and that kind of thing. So
Right.
yeah, they're both great battles. So I mean, the one in Two
Right.
Towers is great as well,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
don't love the Shelob spider scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is the stuff of nightmares.
Right.
It was worse in the theater. At least
Yeah.
the
Oh,
TV,
yeah.
it's not quite as up in your face.
Sure.
The sound effects, even though,
Oh, yeah.
And then this film is it's great. We get to see how Gollum's true evil is revealed,
Mm,
because he's hinting at it. He's telling us the whole
right.
movie, the whole
Right, right.
trilogy, how evil, at least half of him is.
Yes.
And then the film kind of sort of near the end we get that just great conclude or not conclusion, but Sam and Frodo, their friendship really comes together, and they're so,
Yes.
they're such great. I mean, they would die for each other, and
Yep.
that kind of thing.
Hmm.
I love how even at the very end, you're finally ready to throw in the ring, and then Frodo himself is thinking about maybe not doing it.
Right.
It's just really great how, and then he gets attacked, and that kind of thing.
Right.
So the way that kind of comes together is very, very interesting. It's more than just him, running up and doop, dropping the ring in,
Right. Yes.
and the
Yes.
ring
Yes.
itself doesn't want to die, right? It
Oh,
sits on
right.
top of the lava or whatever it is
Yep.
there.
Yep.
Some really great stuff. The way it comes together.
Yeah.
Um, it is a touch long in the extended edition with the goodbyes and that kind of thing, but
Yeah.
I don't mind it.
Yeah.
I guess I feel like those actors, I love them in those roles. So if they've shown up and filmed it, I kind of want to see it.
Sure. Sure.
Uh, one other thing I'll add to, I mean, I'll just add it here. Throughout both trilogies, there are a lot of sets that they use, like the Shelob spider scenes and some of the
Yeah.
forest stuff
Hmm.
were sets, and you can never tell really that it's a set. Like I don't
Oh,
like in movies where I feel like I'm watching a soundstage because it pulls
yeah.
me out of the film, and
Right.
you pretty much never get that feeling
No.
here.
Oh.
So
Hmm.
just such an achievement and
Hmm.
consistent achievement throughout all the
Yes.
films. So, but yeah, those
Yes.
are just some thoughts I had
Yep.
on Return of the King.
Yeah, this one also I should mention is the winner of 11 Academy Awards,
Oh yeah.
which is I think the tied with Ben-Hur for the most of all
Wow.
time. Ben-Hur and Titanic, I think, were the only other two nominated for that many Academy Awards, or won that many Academy Awards, including Best Picture, 2003. So yeah, quite a stellar achievement. When a fantasy film like that can cross over into the Oscars, we were known for, just picking like, dramatic films or independent films, or it's cool when a big movie like this can do that, because it is so rare. But
Yeah, the
yeah,
talk around it at the time, if I recall correctly, was a lot of fans of these movies were thinking, why is there no Oscar attention and that kind of thing? And then so
right,
when Return of the King got so many, it was pretty clear that the Oscar voters were probably thinking, well, there's three films, we'll just give them all to them, when the
right,
third one comes out.
exactly, yeah,
It was
right,
obviously very because if it's that good, then the other two should have gotten some,
sure, sure,
awards as well. So obviously they just saved up the votes for the last one. Whatever.
yeah, 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 exactly. Okay, well, that's it for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Now it's time to dive into the Hobbit trilogy, which came about a decade later. The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey was released in 2012. This one had long production history. After the huge success, obviously the studio's like, "Give me more. What else we got? Oh, there's another book. Let's do that one." And so Peter Jackson is on board to produce, and they hired Guillermo del Toro, one of my favorite directors, to direct what was going to be a two-part Hobbit
Yeah.
adaptation. So it was going to be The Hobbit. The first one was going to be titled Riddles in the Dark, and the second one was going to be titled There and Back Again. And he had planned it. He had concept art done. I mean, he was, I think, well into pre-production. And there were some kind of delays. I forget exactly what it was, if it was weather or if it was finances, or I forget exactly what happened, but there were some delays, and he had other projects that he wanted to work on. So he had to leave The Hobbit, and that left it in the hands of Peter Jackson, who jumped back into the director's chair for this new trilogy. And this one is, like you mentioned, it's kind of the lightest of the bunch. This first Hobbit movie, it's very funny. I'm laughing throughout this. The dwarves are just so hilarious, and their antics when they get
Yeah.
into Bilbo's house there and they're eating all the food and all of it. It's just tons of fun. It's tons of fun to
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah.
Um, and this one has I mean, the Hobbit movies had, or the Lord of the Rings movies have a big cast, but this is kind of an even bigger cast, right? 13 dwarves plus
Yeah.
Bilbo
Yeah.
plus Gandalf, and then you have all the rest on top of that. So it's a big cast of characters, And but all of them are well cast. I like all the actors here. Martin Freeman is fantastic as a young Bilbo. Of
Yeah.
course, at this point, Ian Holm was much older, and couldn't play Bilbo again. Of course, they did those bookend scenes, I think, with him and Frodo, Elijah Wood coming back for a quick little kind of cameo to kind of frame the
Yeah.
story. But Martin Freeman does a great job as a young Bilbo. I really like his portrayal of that character. And of course, Ian McKellen's back as Gandalf, the ever ageless Gandalf. 2000, I think he's supposed to be like 2,000 years old. Um,
Well, he's younger here, right? He
right,
seems to be
exactly.
like
But he
60 years younger.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep.
I mean,
So
not technically.
right, exactly. Yeah, Ian McKellen was older, but yeah, he's playing a
Yeah.
younger version of Gandalf here. So this one's great. It's fun. I really enjoy this one. I like watching it. I just think that there are a lot of characters and I don't really know them all. I kind of like
Mm,
know Bilbo, Gandalf, and Thorin Oakenshield. He's like
yeah.
main leader of the dwarfs. So I feel like I get to know them. All the other dwarves are kind of just in the background, just kind of doing funny stuff, which is fine. You don't have to have every character fully fleshed out, obviously, but I feel like they kind of get lost in the shuffle a little bit. Um, this one also is interesting. It's notable for being shot in 48 frames per second rather than the traditional 24 frames per second, to try and give it a heightened realism. And I think it was also to make the 3D look better, because this one was shot in 3D as well. Unfortunately, to me, it looks a little weird. It doesn't look like a movie. It looks kind of like uh, there's
Stage play?
stage play or kind of like
Oh,
I don't know if you're aware of um, motion smoothing on TVs. I'm sure you've
sure.
maybe heard
Yep.
about that. They
Hmm.
do it for like sports, and things like that. And it kind
Yeah.
of feels
Yeah.
like that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't have that traditional film look that I'm
Hmm.
used to. So
Yeah.
I'm all for innovation. I'm all for trying new things. And they tried something new. I just don't think it really worked. I do remember seeing it in 3D and enjoying it in 3D in the theater. I just feel like it's also I think it was shot digitally in 4K if I'm not mistaken. So it has a little bit more of a sheen to it. And to me
Less
it's
filmic.
less filmic, and to me instead of
Yeah.
helping it
Sure.
feel more real, it helps it feel more fake.
Hmm.
Because you can kind of see like the makeup a little bit, like it looks like makeup instead of it looking like a
Hmm.
character.
Interesting.
So I have a little bit of an issue just with the general visual look of the film. Not that the
Ah.
cinematography and camera work is bad, just the kind of technology they employed to kind of, I think what they were trying to aim for is enhancing the realistic feel of it. And I think it had the opposite effect. So um, that's an issue I have with the whole trilogy. But again, this first one
Hmm.
is a lot of fun to watch. So I don't hate the movie or anything. Bert, what do you think of this first Hobbit movie?
By the way, did you watch it in 4K or 2D Blu-ray?
I've got the 2D Blu-ray.
Okay. I just wondered. I wondered if it was a 4K issue.
Yeah,
You make things
yeah,
even clearer, and then it's yeah, you see
right.
more of the yeah,
Yeah, but no, even the Blu-ray, like comparing The Hobbit on Blu-ray to the Lord of the Rings, the first Lord of the Rings on
yeah.
Blu-ray, there's a difference. You can see it. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we talked about that before, the newer like shot on digital films that this
yeah,
like Amazon and Netflix are doing.
right.
And efforts directors have taken, like the director of the Batman to try to
Yeah,
change
right.
that up and not make it look digital, which I
Yep,
appreciate. And that film looks great, of
definitely.
course.
It does.
So okay, criticism noted on that. I'll tell you what, I was very surprised how much I liked this trilogy when I rewatched it. This is only the second
Okay.
time I've seen these films,
Oh, okay.
and I was around, 3.5 stars from my first watch, but that was
Hmm.
several years, I mean, 10 years ago,
Hmm.
8, 10 years ago. And I was just floored how much I enjoyed these.
Okay.
Mentioned Martin Freeman. Yeah, he's just excellent as Bilbo.
Yeah.
Honestly, he even looks a little bit like a younger Ian Holm.
Yes,
And
yes.
so, but the nuances that he has to play to playing off these dwarves and being put out and all this
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
he is so. I mean, he's got such a knack at that. he was in
Right.
the British version of The Office and
Right.
played kind of a similar role in some
Right.
ways. But
Okay.
yeah, he carries this trilogy in my opinion.
Yeah.
But and yeah, Richard Armitage is really good too.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the nostalgia of well, when I saw this film in the theater, you see Bilbo and Frodo back in the Shire, and
Right.
there's glimpses of well, more than glimpses in of Gollum, and I found
Right.
myself like wanting more of that stuff, and that kind of took me out of the film a little bit.
Sure.
The second time watching, I didn't feel that so much, so
Mm-hmm.
that helped things too.
Yeah.
There's some pretty exciting sequences here, like those rock monsters fighting. There's a like a
Right.
cave troll chase fight
Yeah.
sequence that's really bonkers. Um, it's obviously goes quite CGI heavy, but I think there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of miniatures and stuff like that too.
Hmm.
The silliness for me goes a little too far when the Goblin King starts singing, but it's a brief moment. But and then having Gandalf back is for three more movies. I never thought I would see that, and that's
Yeah.
great. And he is supposed to be younger. And honestly, I don't know if I was just looking for this, but I feel like his dialogue was actually a little bit more youthful too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that probably was on purpose. Like he seemed a little bit, just maybe a little bit lighter, and
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Right.
Um, and I'll talk about him some more in the next film. But
Sure.
one thing that just really struck me though with this is that sure the story maybe isn't quite as compelling. You don't have Frodo and all this stuff going on. Him trying to stay alive and all this, but everything about the film, the sets, the wardrobe, hair,
Mm-hmm.
makeup, the scale,
Mm-hmm.
the effects, the locations, all of it's just
Mm-hmm.
first class, just like Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
The force perspective is just as good, if not better, in this film and the two sequels from it. So
Mm-hmm.
um, the dwarves, I couldn't tell you all the different personalities they have, but there were
Sure.
definitely several unique ones that stood out. So I feel like
Yeah.
I at least knew a few of them, like the
Right.
guy with the red hair and
Yeah.
the beard that comes around and ties in a knot, that kind
Right.
of thing.
Right.
So that
Yeah.
those costumes are really really great.
Yeah.
So I just think there's some excellence here. I got
Yeah.
a couple little quibbles myself with it.
Mm-hmm.
The look of the film didn't really bother me. I watched it in
Okay.
3D though, but
Mm.
it is a little bit more hyper realistic. But
Yeah.
it didn't really bother me.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Great. I should mention the runtime, 2 hours 49 minutes for this one. Extended cut, 3 hours 2 minutes, and the extended or the theatrical version, the Goblin King does not sing. So
Oh,
this is another one where I do lean towards the theatrical versions because I think they got it down to where it needed to be, and the extended versions just
gotcha.
add a little too much that's just not necessary. So,
Okay.
um, all right, let's jump to the next year, 2013, the Desolation of Smaug, or Smog, or Smaug. I don't know. There's other ways of pronouncing it, I guess. This one's really interesting. Again, expanding on the world a little bit. We get to see a few new locations here, and we get introduced to Bard the Bowman, played by Luke Evans. Really cool character. Easily my favorite character of this trilogy.
Oh,
Um, really, really interesting guy, a dad, and he's kind of in this really interesting place, Lake Town, kind of this corrupt city, I guess you could say. Really like his character and what they did with him. This one, we kind of going on along this journey with these dwarves and Bilbo, and this is one where we get some stuff with Smaug, this huge dragon, played by Benedict Cumberbatch. And he does a great job not only voicing the character, but it's another one he played via motion capture. And it's really fun to watch him do
yeah.
that, crawling around on the floor and acting out all these scenes on this, soundstage. Really fun to watch that behind the scenes stuff. Maybe even more fun than the movie. It's really cool. This one I like a lot. I think though that it kind of gets a little out of hand with some of the action. There's that whole barrel sequence in the river, which to
Mm-hmm.
me just kind of feels like a cartoon. It doesn't really have
Mm-hmm.
any weight to it. It's like it's kind of cool to watch because it's a lot of it's done in like this long oneer. It's pretty impressive actually, but it kind of takes me out of the movie a little because that first one I felt was really grounded and
Yeah.
this one just kind of takes it up a notch, but maybe a little too far.
Gotcha.
Because I like when sequels kind of go bigger and kind of go a little crazier, but I felt like it maybe went a little too far with some of that action that just didn't feel like like a dwarf could survive that. All these barrels just like rolling and breaking and all this crazy stuff happening. So
Sure,
again, it's kind of
sure.
fun to watch, but it kind of just took me out of the movie a little. Where it gets me back though is with that Lake Town stuff with Bard the Bowman and
Yeah, yeah,
sneaking around there, and Legolas of course comes back, and this new character
yeah,
played by Evangeline Lilly Toriel. I really liked her character as well. And so, yeah, the end of the movie I think is really strong. All the stuff with Bilbo and Smaug is
yeah,
really great. Um, just the scale of it is incredible. It's really, really cool the way they did all that, and it's very suspenseful and interesting. So, I like this one quite a bit. There's some issues with it, but it has another great kind of conclusion cliffhanger ending, a lot like Two Towers, where we're kind of like leading right into the next movie. And I thought it worked pretty well. So, what do you think of the Desolation of Smaug?
I think it's pretty great. I think that it's if this film had included the ending of what happens with Smaug.
Oh,
th-
yeah.
the thing is, in
Hmm.
the next film, in the first 11 minutes, Smaug is defeated.
Right.
So I know the movie's already long,
Sure.
but it's such a unforgivable cliffhanger.
Yeah.
You had to wait a year to find out what
Right.
was going to happen with that.
Yep.
But yeah, I do really enjoy this film.
Yeah.
Yeah, the barrel scene, it is over the top, which is maybe unlike a lot of the rest of the series.
Right.
But I enjoy it a lot. And yeah, that Lake Town Village is a really cool set piece,
Hmm.
and great to see Legolas back in action. Again, I never thought we would get that for
Right.
so many years. And there's some really good action. Yeah, the whole last sequence with Smaug though is just very intense. I mean, you know
Yeah.
that he's going to make it, that Bilbo's going to make it to the next film,
Sure.
but it's just very intense. The whole dance of the dragon wanting to have this conversation with Bilbo and Bilbo
Yeah.
trying to avoid it and not sure if he's about to be, you know, torched or
Right.
whatever. It's just all very intense and I love that whole thing. Incredible how they put that sequence together. By the way,
Hmm.
um, I started to watch the behind the scenes. There's
Yeah.
like a couple dozen hours
Yeah.
I mean, the movies are one thing. And then on top of
Sure.
that, I honestly, I couldn't get through it all because I thought, man, I love this place, but I gotta go.
Right.
After I watched probably 3 hours of the behind the scenes. And one of the good things is, I guess, if you really want to know how they did pretty much every aspect of every scene,
Mm-hmm.
they
Yep.
they probably cover it in
Yep.
the appendices. So,
Right.
but anyway, so back to the second Hobbit film. Yeah, I guess that was what I was going to say about it. I just think that again, on my second viewing, just everything about this production is at such a high level. I could even,
Hmm.
criticize maybe a little bit of the CGI, but
Sure.
there's immense effort and the acting talent and all this that you put in that you got here that I just find myself enjoying the entire production.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. All right, moving right along then to the final Hobbit film, 2014's The Battle of the Five Armies. This one is the epic conclusion, and it does conclude with quite an epic battle, the titular battle of these five different armies. I couldn't tell you who all the armies are. That's maybe an issue I have with this one, is almost, it's like the Battle of Minas Tirith. It's like I get like you want to end with this big battle, and that's how the book ends. But I feel like you needed to help us differentiate between like, okay, there's dwarves over here. Is Bilbo and his group another army, and then the elves, and then you have
I
the
agree.
orcs,
I
and it's
found
like,
myself saying that too. Like, what? Wait, does that count as one of the five? Like, it did
right.
pull me out a little bit. I think that the title is not probably the greatest as a result.
Yeah, I agree. Because you're thinking about that, like, okay, who are these five armies going to be? So it confused me a little bit there, but it still looks pretty good. I think, and I think it must have to do with the fact that I think these movies were a little rushed, and that's why, Guillermo obviously we
Mm,
know couldn't do it. It's like the
yeah,
studio probably
yeah,
was like, hey, we want these out these specific years, and that's why Peter
right.
Jackson jumped in because he had the wherewithal to be able to kind of put it together. But I feel like there is a much heavier reliance on CGI, and I get it. CGI had
Yes,
made leaps forward in that decade,
yeah.
um, and it most of it looks great, but there are certain scenes where I'm just like, ooh, that really looks very cartoonish and just not like it's not finished almost. So Um, that's a main criticism of really all the Hobbit movies, especially this third one where it gets a lot bigger and there are a lot more CGI, sequences. Um, Again, I feel like a lot like Desolation of Smaug, there's a lot of kind of weightless, and again, I think it goes to that reliance on CGI more than practical stuff. Weightlessness,
Mm.
literally, like when Legolas is walking on stones as they're falling, and like he's making his way up as they're falling down.
Sure.
Like,
It's a fantasy
I,
film.
you're right, exactly. That's the thing. It's like it's fantasy. He's an elf. They're supposed to be very light on their feet, but it's like almost feels like a video game you're watching in some
Mm,
scenes. So
yeah,
again, it kind of takes me out of it. Whereas Lord of the Rings, it felt so real, so gritty and
sure,
grounded, and just there was weight to everything that happened. This one kind of feels like they went the other way with it. So, but again, like Return of the King, there are these emotional moments that really get me, that really kind of hit home between Bilbo and Thorin or Gandalf or all these different characters and their relationships and things that happen with them. I think it works really well. And so I quite do enjoy it. I almost would have preferred if it didn't reference Lord of the Rings as much, maybe, because I feel like
really.
it
Hmm.
almost becomes more of like us trying to set up Lord of the Rings. I don't know if it's just I would have almost rather this stood alone a little bit more. And I get that
Hmm.
it's connected. And I'm not talking about like take Gollum out or anything like that. I'm just talking about these little kind of things they do, especially towards the end of like
Yeah,
the Ian Holmes stuff and Frodo and all that. I'm just like, it's fine. It's fine. I just kind of maybe would have preferred if they kind of just left it with young Bilbo, going back to the Shire or whatever. Again,
gotcha.
maybe just more of a nitpicky thing, but just this one feels to me the most kind of messy of them, I would say.
Okay.
Even though they're the certain beats that it needs to hit, it kind of hits those pretty well. But I feel like, first of all, that this really I don't think should have been a trilogy. I feel like it feels a little bloated. Like there's like I said, a
Really?
lot of characters, a lot going on that I
Yeah.
feel like when I remember reading the Hobbit book, it was just like it was Bilbo's story and like it was him. Whereas this kind of becomes about it's like very Thorin Oakenshield focused,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Gandalf has this whole side quest he goes on, and all of that trying to set up Sauron. I thought was just kind of felt a little out of place, a little bit like in a Hobbit story. I think maybe if they
mm,
had called it like I don't know, the Second Age of Middle Earth or something else other than
yeah.
the Hobbit. Like the Hobbit, I feel like kind of gets lost in these movies a little bit because there is so much else going on, and it's cool stuff, and it's cool to know like why this happened and how this happened and what led to that and that kind of thing. But I don't know. I just feel like it kind of fails as an adaptation of a book, kind of succeeds as a prequel to Lord of the Rings, which I guess is
Hmm.
technically what they were trying to do more. So I don't know. I'm a little mixed on this trilogy. There's a lot I like about it. I just think it has quite a few issues that I'm not crazy about either. So what do you think of this
Gotcha.
final entry in the Hobbit trilogy?
Yeah, I get those criticisms that you say. When I watched this again, I felt like there was so much there that I enjoyed that I just didn't really care about the things that were maybe not on point.
Sure, sure.
From Yeah, and you mentioned the tie-in to The Lord of the Rings. One thing I really enjoyed, and I watched all six films, but I started with The Hobbit this time.
Oh, okay,
And I
cool.
found that quite rewarding.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten some of the things that are said and done in The Hobbit. So when they're
Mm,
referenced in The Lord of the Rings,
right.
did I flip that around? Anyway, I
Yeah,
was going to point out some examples.
sure.
Like there's a moment where there's this great showdown sequence with these ghostly things, and
Mm,
Gladriel's there, and Saruman's fighting, and
right.
and Gandalf had just been beaten down. Elrond,
Yeah.
I think, is there. It's a
Yep,
really
yep.
exciting sequence.
Hmm.
And side note, Gandalf was a way better fighter when he was 60 years younger.
Yes.
He's got I don't know if it's his staff, but he's got like this energy field thing that he uses,
Yeah,
and it's like he should have brought that to Lord of the Rings.
right.
And it does look a bit video game-ish, but I still
Hmm.
enjoy the sequence. It's a pretty
Sure.
exciting battle.
Hmm.
But at the end of that, Saruman says that he's something about he's going to go chase down Sauron,
Yeah.
which then obviously that must mean that Sauron got the better of him because he turns
Yep.
him, right? So
That's
I like
right.
that little comment in there. I thought that was really
Sure.
cool. So at the end of the film too, Legolas is talking about heading off to find this guy named Strider, and
Yep.
so it's clearly just trying to make it more seamless, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
And then when watching Fellowship of the Ring, I noticed there's a lot of references in that film that we end up seeing in The Hobbit. And so when I'm watching The Hobbit, I kind of forgot that those references are there. So like
Yeah.
there's a whole scene with the trolls, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
they want to eat the dwarves, and so and
Yep.
then we get to when they freeze, then we get to see that also in the Fellowship of the Ring.
That's
And so
right.
there's a few of those kind of
Yeah.
moments like that too that I
Right.
really enjoyed because I'd
Uh-huh.
forgotten they were in Fellowship. So
Sure.
watching them in, I guess you could say, chronological order, date
Yes.
order,
Yes. Uh-huh. Yep.
it was very rewarding. So I actually liked a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff. I think that's one of the reasons I liked it so much.
Cool.
The dragon scene, the 11 minutes where Smaug has his moment,
Right.
that's pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but what really helped these films too, and especially this third one, the third Hobbit film, is Bilbo's story arc. Because
Mm.
if you think about it, early on, he wanted really no part of this. He had to really
Yes.
be talked into going on the journey,
Right.
and by the end, he's very courageous and
Mm-hmm.
willing to fight for a cause that's not his own. So
Yep.
I thought that was very successful and um, uh, the way that comes about. Same
Mm-hmm.
with Thorin,
Mm-hmm.
played by Richard Armitage. I
Yep.
mean, his character arc is really good too.
Yeah.
Even like Evangeline Lilly, she's good in it. We see a lot of range from both of those two.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's probably all I was going to say about the third film. But yeah, I mean, I think I like this a lot more than you did.
Yeah.
I just found that it was just I could knock it a little bit too, but I just
Sure.
there's so much I enjoyed.
Yeah.
The amount of stuff that I enjoyed in this film far exceed most films that I watch, frankly. So
Gotcha.
that's
Gotcha.
where I'm at.
Great. Excellent. Great stuff. Awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of the mainline live action Middle Earth saga. Now, briefly, I'm going to discuss the newest film, The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim.
Hmm.
This was just released this weekend. Got to go check it out in theaters. This is a very unique movie because not only is it set 183 years before The Fellowship of the Ring,
Oh,
it is also the first ever anime Lord of the Rings movie. So it's a Japanese animation studio that produced this film along with Warner Brothers Animation. Peter Jackson produced.
oh,
His co-writer Philippa Boyens is behind it as well, who was on all of the Lord of the Rings films. And so it's very much part of the Middle Earth, story. It's set in the same world. It's just in the distant past. And the film follows a young woman living in Rohan. So that's the main setting of the film. And she uh, she is the daughter of the king. The king's name is Helm Hammerhand, and he is voiced by the one and only Brian Cox,
oh,
who does a fantastic job in the film. The entire voice cast is great. They all really do a
hmm,
great job with each of these characters. Um, and it's about basically this other faction in Rohan that tries to kind of usurp his throne.
hmm,
And so it's very interesting. It's very well done.
hmm.
Shows us this kind of, Rohan. We get to know Rohan pretty good in, Two Towers, but this one really goes into the history of these people and what they're all about. There's little references that you'll like, when I was rewatching Two Towers, I was like, oh, they mentioned that in the animated movie. So
Oh,
it's very much connected in a cool
okay.
way. Um, some really big connections, some that are kind of more subtle.
Hmm.
But it's really well done. First of all, the animation just looks beautiful. I mean, again, the way they recreate New Zealand, kind of in the film is
Yeah.
really amazing.
Hmm.
Really does look great. And it's not the 3D CGI animation. It's, the 2D kind of
Oh,
animation, but all hand drawn and just it looks really, really amazing. I don't
huh.
know how long it took them to make this movie, but it looks like they put a lot of time and effort into it. The action sequences are fantastic. Some really big battles, some are more just like one-on-one battles that are really, really good. Great music in it, really great music. Really liked it. It's 2 hours, 14 minutes, so it's the shortest of
Hmm.
all the Lord of the Rings films, but it's still pretty long for an animated movie.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
And so they did a great job with it. It's really seamless. It feels just like it's part of that world, but yet it's a part of it we haven't really seen a lot of before. And like I said, all new characters.
Okay.
So that's really cool. I thought the story was excellent. Where they went with it was I didn't know kind of what to expect, and what they ended up doing was really, really interesting and cool. For
Okay.
fans are really going to love it. But even if you're not a fan, what's great about this one is very accessible. You don't have to have seen any Lord of the Rings movie to watch it. It kind of explains everything to you. It's narrated by Miranda Otto, who played
Oh.
Éowyn in the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Hmm.
And you'll even hear Dominic Monaghan and Billy Boyd, who play Merry and Pippin in there. They make a little cameo as not as Merry and Pippin, but as two different characters,
Okay.
which was really cool.
Oh,
So really, really big fan of this. Again,
okay.
it's
Good.
totally new kind of take on it just because of the format, it being an anime. But it's really, really good. It's a smaller cast, which I liked. It's not one of these
Yeah.
like ensemble casts, like there's 13, 14 characters you have to follow. It's like really two main characters and then, a few other characters around them.
Okay.
But really, really good. I really enjoyed it a lot and highly recommend it. I really think that this is a great way for the franchise to continue. I feel like it's very
Yeah.
innovative. Not a lot of franchises end up going like being a live action thing, then become an animated thing. That's not typical. But a few franchises have done that, and it's been very successful. Spider-Man, of course, has the animated
Transformers.
Spider-Man. Yeah, Transformers just did it
Yeah.
as well. So I think it's a really smart way to go.
Yeah.
And I think it hopefully will do well at the box office. We'll have to wait and see. But me and I went with a pretty big group of people from our church, and we all enjoyed it immensely.
Hmm.
So really excited to see, Bert, what you think of it. I know you're not as big
Yeah.
of an animation guy, but I think this is, since it's a Lord of the Rings, I think you're really going to get a lot out of it.
Yeah. I can't wait to see it.
Excellent. All right. Well, now it's time to rank the Middle Earth movies. So I'll have seven in my list, Bert. You'll have the six.
Hmm.
So if you want, I'll kick it off
Yeah.
with my number seven, and then we'll work our way to number one. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So my number seven is going to be the Battle of the Five Armies.
Uh,
I felt this was the weakest of all of them. I'm only at 3 stars on it,
Oof.
so I don't think it's a bad movie. I wouldn't say I hate it. I wouldn't say it's like the worst movie ever. But of these films, which are all so good, it was definitely my least favorite. What do you have at number six?
I also have battled five
Do
armies.
you? Okay.
Yeah, here's the thing. I'll tell you right now, all six of these are five-star films right now
Oh,
for me. I
really?
had so much fun
Wow.
watching these.
Wow.
So it's
Okay.
kind of like which one is the worst? Yeah,
Right,
it's the
right.
worst, maybe if you can call it that, but I
Okay.
thoroughly enjoyed it.
Okay, great. All right, moving
Yeah.
on to my number six. At 3.5 stars, so a half star above, I'm going to put The Desolation of Smaug. Got a little too goofy for me, but what do you have at number five?
Same thing. And I
Okay.
still think if that dragon finale would have been in this film,
Yeah, right.
might have propelled it higher, but I get why they didn't do it.
Sure. All right. Number five for me is that first Hobbit movie, An Unexpected Journey, which I have at 4 stars. So I quite enjoy this
Oh,
one. I think this one is pretty strong,
yeah.
but there's just some issues I have with it. So that's what's at number five for me. What do you have at number four?
Same. Unexpected
Okay,
journey.
gotcha.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, gotcha. All right, so we're on the same page so far.
Yeah.
For me at number four, I'm putting The War of the Rohirrim. Uh,
Oh, okay.
this was fantastic. I really liked it. Honestly, I I have this one and my number three are really close.
Oh, yeah.
This was really strong movie that I can't wait to watch again. Bert, what do you have at number three?
And my three and two were very hard to figure out which to put
Yeah.
it, where, but I'm gonna go with Return of the King at three.
Okay. Gotcha. That's what I have at my number three is Return of the
Okay.
King. I have it at 4.5 stars, just like War of the Rohirrim. I rated those the same, 4.5 stars.
Okay.
Really strong. Have a few little issues with the multiple endings. I feel like they should have maybe cut it off a little sooner, but
Yeah.
really strong film, great conclusion. It's one of the best trilogies ever. All right, Bert. So what do you have at
Mhm.
number two?
So my number two is the Two Towers.
Okay, okay. See, we're
Mhm.
flipped here because I have Fellowship at two.
Okay.
Long time. This is interesting about the Lord of the Rings trilogy. They flipped a lot.
Yeah.
So I had Return of the King at number one for a long
Yeah.
time, and then it flipped and it was Fellowship at number one, and now it's changed. So yeah, I have Fellowship at two. So you're number one.
Yeah, I can't beat the variety that that film
Yeah,
has, because you got so much of the good stuff with the Shire, and the other two films
right.
don't have it like that,
It's a good
Plus,
point.
you got Sean Bean
Yes. Oh man, he's
dying,
so
about the
good.
only person that does,
Yes, right, right.
So yeah, that's my number one is Fellowship. Yep.
Excellent choice. Yeah, I have Two Towers at number one right now for me. I just really,
Okay.
really enjoy that movie. I think it's a well-rounded film. So yeah, I'm a big, big fan of that movie. All right,
Nice.
folks, that's it for our Lord of the Rings Middle Earth saga ranking and review. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos. Bert, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Cam.
All right, thank you again, all of you. See you next time right here on The Real World.